Hello, everybody. It's an absolute delight for me to be with my dear friend Steve Sims. And I'd love to begin by gifting everyone just 3 deep breaths with Steve and I before we jump into the journey. If that's all right, just to ground ourselves in. So let's settle in for 3 deep breaths together at your own speed and range. Mm. Ah, so good to be with you. Just to set the context, Steve is my mentor. Many people come to me for advice, suggestions, and ideas, and I go to Steve for that. So here's the source of the river. Very, very grateful to have the riverman with me. Steve has lived a life less ordinary. I'm not one to go through people's bios. Enough to say that I think the world of Steve. He has changed my life dramatically. A significant moment was when I first started, switching from engineer to being a yoga consultant and a speaker. And I was speaking at the Padua Center where Steve was a director. And I remember after about, I don't know, 15 or so speaking episodes, Steve came to me and said, Bhaskar, you're getting good, dangerously good. And it gave me the confidence to take the show on the road. So a lot of who I am comes from Steve. So here we are just chatting and chilling. So how is Steve this morning?
Steve's good. Steve's, as I get older, takes me a little longer to wake up. So that's your job.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm also graying up the hair. So we're not that far apart. Well, that is, that's what it feels like. Also takes me a while to get, especially in the wintertime. I see lots of books behind you. I know I don't profess any academic brilliance. As you can judge my background, I have no information, but I do have information in front of me. Dun, da, da, da. I have Dear Steve's Noble River Trilogy. This is my favorite collection of books. It has the quotes of some of the most profound thinkers and wisdom counsel of our times and ancient times as well, Eastern, Western. And it's been a labor of love, I know, for Steve for many, many years to put this book together. And Steve and I have something in common. We are lovers of words. However, Steve is a master of words where I'm just an apprentice. And I know you love breaking words down. I'm wondering if there's any word or phrase that you're playing with right now.
Well, it's a wisdom trilogy, so we could sort of start with that word. And it's kind of fun when you ask people, what is wisdom? And you get, so I'll ask you that question, Bhaskar, right to start, and then we can play with that word.
Sure. What is wisdom? What's spontaneously coming up from me is what it's not. It's not intellectual capability. It's not cleverness, not street smart. There is all these things are like swords, and wisdom is the hand that holds these swords. I sense it as a kind of knowingness, a more sort of subtle and profound access to the reality in which we find ourselves, not through knowledge, through direct experience. And I sense wisdom is not necessarily something gained over a lifetime. There are some people who are just born super wise. I'm speaking to one right now, perhaps. And it's kind of like physical strength. Some people are physically born strong. Some people have very born gifted at the basketball or the violin. And some people are just born wise. And maybe it's karmic past lives, and maybe that's just a serendipitous fortuity of birth. The wisdom, I would say, is a deep experiential knowingness that at the very least, there's something more happening than this mind-body system. There's a higher intelligence at play.
So there's a sort of a big word in the conversation, and that's knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could say it's a type of knowledge that we're born with. It's intrinsic. Is it, but it's only to some and not to others? Like some people have the gift of wisdom and others don't. Can we grow in wisdom?
Very, very great questions.
How do we grow in wisdom?
Yeah.
We speak of acquiring wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You could speak of being streetwise too. People acquire a set of skills, or they tap into a certain resourcefulness or resilience that enables them to sort of survive on the street.
Yeah, this expression is streetwise. It really throws a spanner in my works of understanding what wisdom is. I would call that more street smart than streetwise. That's just me. Wisdom to me is it feels much more like an unlearning than learning, or unknowledging than knowledging. It's just maybe a strange way to put it. So going back to your point about, what are the constraints of wisdom? To me, I don't believe it's constrained at all in terms of gender or social status or culture or religion or tradition. It is just a serendipitous fortuity of birth. You can get the wisest people and the diametric opposite in all walks and spectrums of life. So it's independent of the avatar of how we incarnate and where we incarnate and the beliefs and philosophies we take on. So I get the sense that we grow in wisdom from almost discarding. At least this is my journey. I thought I knew stuff, and in life, way of showing me something else.
What do you have to discard?
To me, it feels like discarding ignorance of who you think you are, so that who you actually are reveals itself spontaneously.
Right.
Or what you think life is, at a grander, non-localized way of putting it.
So if we talk about knowledge, we talk about knowing, and it's a great question, like how do we come to know anything? And I would say, of course, we ask questions, we live questions, we speak about a quest, we speak about a journey of self-discovery. And I think that, I would speak myself of wisdom as knowledge, but then I ask, because most people, when you ask them what is wisdom, they say, well, it's knowledge of some kind. And I say, well, what differentiates scientific knowledge from wisdom? Or you could speak of it as philosophy, of course, comes from the word philia and sophia, the love of wisdom. So actually, when you pursue, I think it's, with any kind of knowing, we experience something and we want to understand our experience. Now, to understand our experience, there's self-inquiry. We have to, just be present to ourselves, radically present, to collect the data of our own experience. The hero journey, the hero goes inward to be born again, Joseph Campbell. So I think it's inner, like you've suggested that it's inner, it's inside of us. So people talk about it and it's kind of fun and it goes all over the place when you say knowledge, but I say it's knowledge and energy is what I say. And it's that knowledge that I would say teaches the heart to open. And the energy, when I speak of energy, like as this is what you allude to, it's the very essence of ourself. Like it's who we are. It's the intelligence of the universe right inside of us.
Going deep, yes.
And I would say it has to be, we have to actually work to discover ourselves and that deep inner essence. And with that comes an uprush of awareness or knowledge or wisdom that will guide us down the river of life. When we speak of river, there's a lot of people going down the river of life and they don't have any experience, they don't have a teaching, and they don't have a community. They're not river wise,
Mm-hmm.
you know what happens to them.
Yeah.
They hit the
Upside.
rocks and they're upside
I've
down.
been there.
Okay, I think we all have. So I'll show you my scars. But the way I like to say it is there's a vector. Like when we want to know something, I have a pain in my knee and I'm present to that. And then what's this pain all about? What's given rise to this pain? So there is a process of trying to understand our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we ask questions. We question our experience. We question, what is this? What's going on? What's happening inside me? What's going on outside me? So that is, we have, I think we're born with, and you talked about this, a deep desire to know. And we're born with a deep desire to love. And the two of those go together. And so I speak of wisdom as the knowledge of love. That's my simple definition of love. And then the second question I asked you is, can we grow in wisdom? How do we do that? Well, I think, and this might be the second word that we can discuss, is awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think we awaken that intelligence that's deep within us, that is our inner essence. And it brings us, into a higher dimension of consciousness. So going down the river of life, if you have a good teaching and you have or a good guide that's with you, someone that's been down the river, like we learn from the poets and the philosophers, this book of the 3 books of wisdom, there's 1,000 voices, but they're all sharing some of their hard-won wisdom that will serve to help me navigate the unknown, because all of us are like a river. We're journeying into the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of knowing is we ask questions, we puzzle over things, we want to understand. It's not the mind. This is the use of intelligence, and then when we get an insight, it's gratuitous. It comes. We don't get it. Sometimes we puzzle over things for a long time, and it's a stubborn paradox. It's a conflict that doesn't seem to have a resolution, and we get frustrated. But just our effort meets grace, so to speak. It's like 2 vectors. And then all of a sudden we have that eureka, and it comes from, as you said, deep inside of us. There's a uprush of knowledge or wisdom. It's a gift. In the Christian tradition, they call it a gift of the Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
So, but energy is the word. And of course, like writing the Wisdom Trilogy, like I said, that was the best assignment anyone could get from the universe, because it just gave me energy for 4 years. I just was, all these voices of wisdom were just activating some of that deep knowing that is inside me, but has to come into consciousness, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are a few thoughts.
Okay. So I'm hearing a few things. I'm hearing the word remembering. Like you said, it's deep inside me and it came to the surface. So it almost feels like, I forgot about that. So this word remembering is coming up. And what I've understood you expressing is that it comes from questioning experience. So when we question our experience, what's called an examined life, then we sort of become experientially aware or knowledgeable about some deeper truths or deeper untruths that reveal themselves. Would that be a fair way to say it? And then the energy component is the inspiration that comes from that, or I just want to see how you mean energy.
Well, energy, I mean, the ego has its own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you used the word ignorance before.
Mm-hmm.
So wisdom dispels ignorance. That would be an awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And it dispels arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
Ignorance and arrogance. Now, those are sort of the hallmarks of the ego. Mm-hmm. And so wisdom will just help you to dismantle your ego striving, to unmask the ego. And then you're left with what you mentioned before is like it's just who are we, you know, and it's you basically have to peel away everything to get to the essence of who we really are. And that's sort of becoming a nobody. That's a good conversation.
Yeah, there's so I like this notion
So
of
what
yeah.
I mean by that is everything in the world of form
Mm-hmm.
is an illusion. It's not an illusion in the sense it's not real, but it's transitory. The sun rises on it and the sun sets on all the roles that we play, who we think we are, as you mentioned earlier. And we just keep going with this adventure of discovering. And then there's that quantum leap where we go up to, or not up, but we get a shift, a fairly dramatic shift from I once was blind, but now I see. We go from blindness to a sort of transformed vision. And the wisdom helps us to transcend limitations. Limitations, confinements. We're confined. We have emotional confinements. We're confined by our misperceptions. We're confined most of all by knowledge because we think we know. So it is knowing, but it's not the knowing of the ego or the mind that thinks I've got this all figured out. I know who I am. This is me. And then the whole thing just sort of disappears again. And we're we have to keep going.
Sounds like a loosely held sort of knowing that is more experience-based than, I mean, the information can, of course, inform and inspire, but fundamentally it's a knowing that arises from a direct experience of something different to what we'd imagine things to be. So this dispelling of ignorance and arrogance, wisdom can come not always as a shy question. Sometimes it can come with a knife. It could be a shocking experience. So I'm wondering about that as well. That sometimes wisdom can happen like spontaneously. There have been cases of that, people who just spontaneously awaken to another reality. And sometimes it comes through gradually built effort, sometimes years of dedicated practice. This wisdom of no self, this wisdom of what the Buddhists would call anicca or impermanence, that this phenomenal world is changing. So where are you in this changing world? I was once an engineer, it's come and gone. So I'm still here, but the engineer is gone. So was I the engineer? And I can go on like this, so many things have come and gone. So then this is going back to the questioning experience and that examined life, by simply just examining very deeply and sincerely, okay, so where is this I? And realizing that we are in a phenomenon world, a causal universe where things are constantly changing. And this I, what I thought was an I, seems to be more of a verb than a noun. It's constantly changing phenomena. I mean, you and I, we both had shining black hair or whatever it was. You were blonde probably, but our hair has changed. So we can do so much to look after ourselves, but in the end, the body is changing. We're simply looking after, or at least it feels like we're looking after a changing phenomena as far as the body is concerned. Same with my thoughts and emotions and ideas and philosophies and beliefs. Everything keeps changing. So is that one form of self-examination or self-questioning that can lead to wisdom or undoing of false knowledge?
Yeah. Yeah, when you speak of change, that's a great word too to talk about. And I always talk about a river of change. Every day the river is changing. And so wisdom will help you understand the movement of life. And I mean, we could say, yes, there's archetypal developmental stages in life. We have childhood, and then we have adolescence and shaping a young adult identity. We have the middle passage. Then we have sort of elderhood, and then you have me, in the evening of life. So there you are. So I've been through them all. I've got one more week. But every threshold is a significant shift that's taking place. And it's all programmed, as you say. Joseph Campbell called it standard metamorphoses. But how we understand those changes, and of course, the great thing is attachment to form. So if you get attached to, say, your young adult identity, by the time you hit the middle passage, a lot of people are trying to go back, and they get stuck at the threshold. And there's a new season of life coming, what Jung called, there's the morning of life and the afternoon of life, and then the evening of life. Now, the afternoon is different from the morning, but he emphasized it's no lesser than the morning, but it is different. And the evening also is different from, so knowing what time it is in your life is very important. And if you don't understand that, like I was working in an adolescent rehab center, and it's people who didn't go through an adolescent process well, and that could be that they either were resisting, their own adult development, or it could be that the parents were overprotecting, overproviding, and they themselves were resisting. And so they get stuck there. So how you can help a person, it's like a river. We've got a set of rapids to go through now. We've got to get to the other side. And you could just say, oh, I want to stay here, and pitch your tent. And sometimes that's what people do in life. They just pitch their tent and watch the river. But you got to jump into that river and do the journey. And if you don't, there's a certain amount of suffering in any transformative process, and there's a greater suffering when we resist the transition or the transformation that wants to happen. So when we talk about change, I think, and marry that to wisdom, wisdom is understanding the movement of life and the timing and pacing ourselves. And different cultures, of course, helped with rituals and the severance of the boy from the mother and all of these things. And in our culture now, I don't think we do these threshold crossings very well. And a fellow by the name of Toynbee said, if you get to a threshold, you get stuck there, he said, there's a whole collapse of life energy, vital energy, motivation. Once you get to the other side, there's a whole amplification of energy.
So this lack of rites and ritual at certain thresholds, I'm understanding, is kind of blocking or damaging the flow of energy in our lives and how we navigate through these stages.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And if you have, wisdom that you've received from your elders, from poets and philosophers, and, we have people, literature, like athletes can reveal the hidden potential of our bodies. We can start to reimagine our lives when we see what our bodies are capable of. And I bought a house in Little Burgundy. It was built in 1875. If you walked into that house, you'd probably turn on your heels and say, I'm out of here, because it was pretty dilapidated. But I saw myself, because I've done renovation, I saw the potential for transformation. And so I jumped on it and did the work and turned this old house into, a piece of art, basically. And so the same thing with an individual, like part of the work that I do is help understand, help a person come to see a vision of themselves, which is higher than what they see. I think you
interior designer and carpenter for the human psyche. I as you know, I have a 15-year-old son, and typically, traditionally, men go through rites of passage. In India, you have the Gurukul system that, the young boys had to go through. There's natives and so on, in the Jewish tradition, they all have some sort of rites of passage. And and this generation does not have any rites of passage. I'm wondering how you would support someone, a boy or a girl who's 15 years old, or in that transition or whatever gender.
Yeah, and just seeing what the task is, the developmental task. So I worked a lot with young adults and just like shaping a young adult identity. And and just a simple teaching can help someone understand, because wisdom in the end has to be applied. So that's another conversation. A lot of people are wise, but they're not applying that wisdom. So with shaping a young adult identity, I'd say there's 4 things that you have to basically are the tasks of that developmental process. And I would say you're separating from your family of origin and becoming autonomous. So the whole movement toward autonomy, becoming a self-responsible adult, that would be one. Then there's lifestyle choices, and that's the values that are underpinning the choices that you make about your life. Then there would be mating, a partner, relationships, that whole area. And then the 4th would be some kind of career track, vocation, trade. So when people, just have a simple little scheme like that, they can start to say, well, where am I stuck? And they can see these 4 things, or they could become.
Push back a little bit. I'm going to put, because we live in different times, because that seems to be a very traditional model. But nowadays we literally have like 9-year-olds making multi-million dollars showing toys on YouTube. We have crypto people who are like 15 years old and buying mansions. YouTubers so that the whole model has completely changed, and also this getting married model has completely changed. So all of that has really become so amorphous. For many people, they won't even recognize themselves in the narrative. It's so transformed nowadays, the way we live. So I'm just wondering if there's room for a new narrative with like a rites of passage 2.0, where the yardsticks might have changed, but there's still some kind of like you say, energy flow instead of blockage in those transitions. The transitions remain, so the context remains, just the content has changed dramatically.
Yeah. No, and you see people that are 3 years old that are computer, just working a computer. Is that helpful? Or, well, so back to Joseph Campbell, when he says, no matter what, life has its own program. It's a given. Mm-hmm. So when you say you get to puberty, there's a certain physiological, a big psychic revolution. There's a lot of change that's happening. Mm. And that's built right into what life is, as we talked about before. Yeah. I did a lot of midlife workshops, which were a lot of fun, and sometimes in those groups, I would let a 35-year-old in, and they were a little ahead of schedule, but they were poised for the middle passage. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people tell me, even at the age of 30 and 25, oh, I've already done all that. Those tasks that belong, like the task of individuation. And, so some people say, well, I'm ahead of schedule. I don't think you can. Later on, of course, the mm-hmm. middle passage comes and, oh, whoa, I thought I'd done all this work. I thought I was on the other side. So, yeah, there might, obviously, the changes in the outer world are impacting on how we. But I would say the river is the river is the river.
You remind me of that Cat Stevens song, take your time, think, what's that? Settle down. You know that it's not easy to be young, but you found this. Yeah. I was once like you are now. Yeah. I forget the exact lyrics, but I kind of feel that effect. Like you're telling me, Bhaskar,
Father and son,
river. You cannot short circuit the river.
No, Yeah, and of course, in life, the acceptance is a big thing. Serenity comes from just accepting. A river has a path, and it's going to take you where it takes you.
Yeah.
And you ultimately, I mean, I used to be what I tell others, I used to be a canal guy. It was like making your own river, and it was all about, getting somewhere in a straight line as quickly as I could, so I could arrive at my destination. But at some point, I decided canals are pretty boring, and that's when I became a riverman. And the river is a given, and the rocks are, you can curse the rocks and say that stupid rock and other things, but it's just there. It's unforgiving. The river is just rivering
care
along.
about your opinion. Yeah.
What gets you down the river is wisdom. It's a set of skills. So if you cultivate and the ability to read the river and understand the movement, there's all kinds of vectors, just like in the human psyche, we've got all kinds of things going on in the human psyche. And how do you turn the noise of the psyche into song? If you look at kayakers, you see sometimes they get in very turbulent water and they're just playing with the water. Like they've developed a set of skills, which is remarkable. And
let's peel the onion a little bit, because what I'm hearing you describing is more skillful living, which is I see the river as a metaphor for life, and the kayaking is the journey through life, and that the skillfulness of the kayaker is more skillful living. I'm just wondering if wisdom points to understanding, hey, it's just a ride. You're not the kayaker, you're not the river, it's just a ride. So I'm wondering if wisdom is kind of the foundation that holds that whole story. So wisdom is not being the kayaker, it's not being the kayak, not being the river. It's literally almost like a passenger in that kayaker journey, as in. So is there another sort of substratum of reality that wisdom points to beyond the skillful navigation of the river?
I was just thinking of listening to you, of becoming the river.
Becoming the river.
Like one with the river. And at the end of the Wisdom Trilogy, the epilogue of the book, it's Khalil Gibran. And he talks about, the river eventually meets the ocean. And that's where our fears dissolve. And he says it's not about disappearing into the ocean. It's about becoming the ocean. So I think, so we become the river. Like we're in harmony with the river. And we have to be in harmony with all of creation. We have to be in harmony with our bodies. We have to, and that's wisdom, I think, is something that teaches us the law of harmony. And harmony is oneness ultimately.
Just for fun, I'm going to one up.
Just for fun.
Just for fun, I'm winding up our man Khalil Gibran, who I love a lot. I'm just going to have some fun.
Yeah.
I would actually go so far as to say that in the end, the river becomes the cloud. So just using the cloud as the endpoint, because the cloud basically rains down on the mountain, to the river, to the ocean, to the sea, and So wisdom. I have a 4-year-old at home, and we're talking about true spontaneous presence. As they get older, it becomes more and more, the personality starts to come in. Now she's aware she's a girl. Now she's aware of her name. Now she's aware that she's Canadian, Indian. So all these labels are being put on. She's already 4 years old. But when she was like 0 to 3, there was just pure spontaneous awareness. There's this state of nobody that you pointed to. I would call that pure innocence. So this is kind of, I was like that once. You were like that once. You probably still are. So you go through this river of disillusionment and this crystallizing of personality and persona, and then this is where I speak about the unlearning. At least for me, through the sheer heat of life experience, that persona starts to crack. You realize that this is not real, and then there's a returning to that innocence. There's a band called U2, a famous band, U2. And I think I may be wrong. Their recent tour was called Innocence plus Experience equals Wisdom. innocence plus experience equals wisdom. And that to me sounds like the innocence of the cloud raining down on the mountain and the river of experience. And then you end up in the ocean only to return back to the cloud again with that experience. I'm wondering if that metaphor resonates.
Yeah, it's the hydrological cycle, they call it. So water will just, and then it will evaporate and then it will condense into clouds and then rain down or snow on you. And it's
rebirth has more water in the river.
Water is going round and round and round. And are we going round and round? Perhaps, but I would think of it as we don't return to the innocence of a 3-year-old because we are elevating our consciousness to a higher level. It is innocence in the end. I think when we get pure,
the plus experience.
Pure innocence is pure consciousness, is pure silence, is pure love. Ultimately, of course, that's the noble intention. And I think life is, like, what's the purpose of this hydrological cycle? It all has a very sacred purpose, and all this water is returning and giving us crops and forests and vegetation. So it's all one ball of wax, so to speak. So
I'm just looking at the relationship between wisdom and age. I just want to look at that. This notion that wisdom, is acquired through experience. Are people, some people, and I mentioned perhaps some people are born wise and it was maybe acquired out of serendipity of birth or past life experiences, who knows. And one could go through the full catastrophe of life, yet there is a knowingness behind it that this is just so there's wisdom behind the catastrophe. So I'm wondering if wisdom is something that's acquired through one lifetime, or can you have it throughout the entire lifetime? Could you be born with more wisdom? So, and
so that gets us back to that question about, can we grow in wisdom? I mean, there are old people that are not wise. This doesn't happen automatically. You don't say, he's a wise old man or a wise lady. It just doesn't. So that's why I think a conscious life, and that's where intention and attention help us, create a condition. And again, we're speaking of awakening, of anticipation and readiness to receive wisdom. We have to be open. I think the basic attitude in the spiritual journey is receptivity. We're open to receive. So open to receive, we might say, is the gift of wisdom. But how do we cultivate that openness? And again, we have to go to fear and ignorance and greed and say, how do we transform these limitations? This is the human condition. And now, of course, we're in a world where fear and ignorance and greed seem to be abounding. And so what's missing in human consciousness? Why in this age, when we have all this power, new power, which is very beautiful, and scientific knowledge, why are we still in the spiritual domain living at such a primitive level? Like, what's missing is sort of a good question.
What prevents us from being one? It's a very good question. I genuinely find my 4-year-old very wise, genuinely. I'm in the apex of my life, the midpoint pretty much. And I see you and I see her, but in the two sides of the spectrum, although
oh my God,
you'll be sticking around for a very long time. Nevertheless, the quality of wisdom, although she doesn't have the vocabulary to back it up, but just the insights and how she perceives life, it inspires me so much. Like, wow, we were all once like that. So I do see wisdom in both ends of the spectrum. In the middle, it's sadly lacking for people like me. We're caught in the turbulence of the river. Yet, so there. Let's talk about this notion of having wise counsel. As we go through, let's say, from pre-teens to mid 60s or whatever, in that whole catastrophe of life, when we're trying to figure ourselves out and make a living and so on. where is the place for wisdom council?
You used the word mentoring before.
Mm-hmm.
Like counsel is like I was involved in drug rehabilitation, a social reentry program. And after they'd been at a farm for a year and we're going back to the world, and we had an 8-week called social reentry. And so I said, when they started the journey, I said, there's two things that are very important. And the same when I was doing prison work, and you see people getting out of prison, there's sort of a freedom that they have. And I would always, and they get pretty excited, it's like being sick and then you feel better afterwards. There's kind of a euphoria, but it's also very dangerous energy. It's like infatuation. You can get swept away too.
And
so
unrealistic expectations as well. If they're not met, you often suffer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would always say, hurry slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Hurry slowly, just slowly. Don't try to. And at the same time, the counsel was surround yourself with the right people. And the right people are the people that are going to support your ongoing transformation. You've done a lot of work on yourself for a year. Be sure that you don't go back to the world that you came from. It's kind of that image of the seed. The seed has an insistence to grow, but it needs an environment. It needs the soil and the rain that we talked about, the hydrological cycle, and the sunshine. So if, you as a mentor, what you do is you surround people with your consciousness and your love, and that becomes a very fertile soil in which the seed can release its power and its own unique potential.
I'm reminded of this notion that back in the days, the emperors in India, they used to walk with two people beside them. So to the left, they had their legal counsel, the lawyer, and to their right, they had the wisdom counsel, their yogi.
Okay, that's good.
So it's sort of like a metaphor for our life as well. In that if we were all emperors, it's important to have the practical knowledge on how to navigate through life skillfully, and also have some wisdom counsel in whatever shape or form resonates. It could be spending time in nature, or being in group dialogue, or having a person that inspires, different shapes and forms. But just having both of these, I find are the practicality of living in this avatar, in this manifestation, in this reality, yet the knowingness that there's an undercurrent that holds it all together, which is wisdom.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, I have my ego over here. I have my spirit and my potential, my meaning over here. So
not that all lawyers are egotistical, so no disrespect. We love you guys. Gotta keep our viewers.
So, which voices you're listening to? Because these voices can be pretty loud and very seductive, and you can get pulled into the ego over here. But then there's that calling too. And we can run away from the journey. We can refuse insight. We can refuse questions that need to be asked.
This notion, I want to pick up on this because it's something you mentioned. This just because you have wisdom doesn't mean that you apply it. Is that really wisdom, or is that just knowledge? Is that knowledgeability? But unless it's living, breathing inside you, it's not wisdom. That's just knowledge.
Yeah, so it's got to be applied. It's you've got to live. You've got to live the truth.
I would say almost applied knowledge, or not all knowledge, of course, but applied wisdom knowledge is the manifestation of wisdom. It's not just the knowledge. I could read a book on Rumi and feel very wise and go about doing nasty stuff. That doesn't make me wise, So, yeah.
So the way I say it often is you have to see the good, and then you have to choose the good. See, I can know what represents value in my life, but then I can just choose satisfactions over that value. I can say this is good for me, but then something is more satisfying that sabotages that good, that devalues my life. So seeing the good and choosing the good are very important. And some people see the good, and that's where we get guilt. You have a contradiction. You know what the good is, and yet you go out and do that which contradicts the good that you know, and that sets up a tension in the human psyche.
That's me trying to develop a good habit.
Right.
I see the good and I want the good, yet my habit patterns prevent me from actually manifesting it consistently. There's another word that you brought up that I'd love to look at with you way back. So I'm circling back, like the cloud going back onto the mountain. The word grace. You said when the effort of life experience meets with grace. You made a gesture, something like this. What does the grace mean for you? What is that?
Oh, well, I think that, I mean, it depends on, it's a big word. It could be understand that it's gift, basically. Like we have that famous song, Amazing Grace. I once was blind, but now I see. So it is the idea that it's not by human effort. And in the Christian tradition, St. Paul said at one point, I am no longer trying for perfection by my own efforts. So if it's theistic, you might say it's the action of God in my own soul or being or mind or heart, whatever. And so in a sense, the grace of God meets our effort to know God, somehow they come together. If it's not theistic, you could speak of the quantum universe, that this movement toward higher consciousness, and then there's that leap. Now, does the leap come from your effort? I would say maybe the leap is more gift than our effort. We may take credit for it, but that's the ego sneaking in and saying, look at me. See, I'm up here now. But
I'm reminded of the story as you speak. There's a story about this man who was meditating under this tree very sincerely. And I don't remember the exact story, but the god comes, some god comes. And the man says, how much longer do I have to meditate, before I can be at one with thee, become self-enlightened. Yes. And then this Godhead person said, see all the leaves on this tree? You'll need that many lifetimes before you become self-realized. And the guy got so frustrated. What? Here, I've got all these leaves of lifetimes to go? And he got really annoyed. Okay, this got like being boxed to another man who was just dancing and goofing around the tree. And then, hey, do you want to know how long you got left? Guys, yeah, sure, why not? Tell me how long I got left. He goes, see all the leaves on all the trees in this forest? That's how long you got left. And he goes, only this? Fantastic. And he started dancing. It's nothing. And the dancing buffoon guy became instantly enlightened. Goes the story. So I think what the story points to is our need to become wise might actually make us run in the opposite direction. It's almost like my need to calm my mind is exactly diametrically opposite to meditation. So the need kind of gets in the way of wisdom, to put it in a very blunt way. How does that land?
Yeah, Pema Chodron says the purpose of meditation isn't to become a better meditator. Mm-hmm. So, and we can have a drivenness in our spiritual practices. They can be ego driven. Oh, I have to be perfect. Mm-hmm. The real journey is your tolerance for imperfection and your ability to forgive the imperfection in yourself and in others, and and still have that intention, a noble intention. Mm-hmm. But if and it's again St. Paul who said, I am no longer trying for perfection by my own effort. So you realize it's not your show, it's not your achievement. And the minute you think anything in terms of spiritual practice is an achievement, the purpose of any spiritual practice is just basically, I think, to open the heart. Mm-hmm. And I mean, again, in the Christian scriptures, they used to have this debate with Jesus of what's real religion and what's not. Mm-hmm. And he gave the simple example. He said, you can judge a tree by its fruit. And if it bears good fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, humility, self-control, then you know mm-hmm. that you've got a Holy Spirit mm-hmm. in you. Mm-hmm. But if it's, if it breeds violence, anger, jealousy, and greed, and all these other things, then he says you kind of know, it's kind of bogus. And again, he attacked the people who said you follow all the laws, 600 laws to a T, but it's not the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law. So everything has to be authentic, it has to be real. And ultimately it has to, I think we have to dismantle the ego, because the ego is always in there. It's got a life of its own, and it's very assertive, and it's got its own ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a purification, I think, that's taking place as we go along.
So it sounds to me like you can't take this this insular silo of, self-identity with you when it comes to wisdom. It's also a deep recognition of the sacred geometry of life that I seems to be a part of, and the interconnectedness of it all. I think that's a very wonderful place to land, especially in these times when there is such an abundance of, as you mentioned, fear and all the different hues of fear, that it seems like there's never been a more important time to be curious about wisdom.
Oh, indeed, yeah. And I think that hunger, that thirst, I think now becomes conscious for a lot of people. And it's certainly what we need. I mean, if you're going down the river of life without any wisdom, you're in trouble. And I think that's our culture too. I mean, it becomes more of a spectacle rather than a spiritual adventure. It's more just a spectacle of the ego, and we see that everywhere now. And we buy into the illusion of the ego, and we're trapped. And we also don't have a relationship with death. It's a nice video. We were talking about the seasons of a person's life. So I'm now in the evening of life, and Bill Moyers was interviewing Joseph Campbell, and they're talking about myths, and myths are stories. You love stories that help people understand the movement of life and the challenges and the thresholds. So he's talking about that. And then Bill Moyers says, well, give me an example in your own life. And Joseph Campbell says, when I retired from teaching, he said, I had to think about my life in a whole new way. I had to get out of the sphere of achievement and get into relaxation or enjoyment, appreciation. And this is my little mantra, and relaxing into the wonder of it all. Bill Moyers cuts in and says, well, what about that dark gate that we all have to go through? And Joseph Campbell says, oh, that's nothing at all. I love that line. And he says, with death, he says, as long as you're not identified with the body. If you're identified with the consciousness, because the body is only the vehicle in which the unfoldment of consciousness is taking place. So, and then he says the journey continues, because, your real identity is, beyond form. Everything in the world of form, including the body, has to go. But what's left, and that you asked that earlier, what's left if you take all these identities? And so in life, we have different identities. I have a certain self-image when I'm 21. I have a picture of myself when I'm 30. I have a picture of myself. The sun rises and the sun sets, the wind blows north and then south, everything comes and goes. What is it? Who are you? Or what is unchangeable? And this is ultimately, is there something that is left over when everything goes in the world of form? Who are you? Nobody.
The Steve label is a social convenience. I love this expression, relax into the wonder of it all. That's so beautiful. It almost feels like, don't seek an answer, just enjoy the mystery. There's something about just hanging out with not knowing. Wisdom just makes itself available to you. Relax into the mystery of it all. This is such a profound teaching.
And our deep desire is for more beauty, the eyes to see the beauty that's all around us and that's inside of us, the goodness. We talk about mentoring. I think you're just helping people recognize the goodness that they are. That goodness is in them, but they're not manifesting that goodness because they haven't, they're not conscious of it. So I think more truth, more love, more beauty. That's our deep desire, and true relaxation. You know, wisdom awakens wonder, I would say. There's another connection. And I think it's part of the dedication of the Noble River for all those that are interested in awakening of wonder and wisdom in their life.
I am
So,
absolutely not doing this
three.
yeah, I'm absolutely not doing to promote anything. I don't care about promoting anything. That's not my interest. I will say objectively, this book and this series of books is a life changer. It's great to have it beside you. It's got 1,000 voices of extremely wise people. I so grateful that you put this together, Steve. I cannot thank you enough that this is in my hands. And I wish for the world to have this by their bedside. It will change people's lives. It is that powerful. And I say that in all sincerity. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, and it's changed my life, and I feel very lucky to be the guy that just got the job of putting it together. I tell people, the other simple answer, I tell people about wisdom, I just say it's a great sport. If you're interested, interested in taking up a new sport.
Okay, why not? Play with wisdom. Yeah, it's a one sport that makes you good in all sports.
Yeah, that's right.
Sport of life. Brother Steve, thank you so much for this time together.
Thank you.
Maybe we can land with any thought or phrase that comes to you that you feel would benefit people, or just whatever spontaneously arises. We're listening.
Do people know how old you are?
I
think we should tell them that story, because that we have a very,
all right, let's do this. Let's do that.
My
okay,
bond.
So before we get there, Steve and I have something in common. We played over a dozen games of Bananagram, and we finished every game like down to less than 5 seconds every single time. Most of them like 1 second. We're like that close. We're like exactly equal in Bananagram. And then I looked at the clock, and the clock at that time said 11:11. So hey, Steve, look, 11:11. It was November as well, so another 11. And then, you know, I asked the question, hey, Steve, remind me again how old you are? Steve is 74. And what years were you born? 47. And I happen to be 47 years old, born in 74. And 7 plus 4 makes 11. So we've been playing what we call 11-11 thing. And I just find it, again, grace. That's just pure grace. The sacred grace of life. I'll take it.
I'll take it. Yeah, no, that's the connection. Lovely. It was fun. And just to see that those numbers, born in 47, 74, born in 74, 47, that's fun. So the universe is like this. It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. So enjoy the fun, my dear viewers, listener. And yes, just rest into the mystery of it all. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you, Steve G. Much love.
Abba G, thank you. Lovely.